Before the itching, before the rashes, there was love and a clean home with commitment, infection-free home. Let's look deep into the story. From the outside, Teo and Amaka looked like the perfect couple. Married for 3 years, they lived in a newly furnished duplex in Lekki, drove matching SUVs, and often posted cheerful videos on Instagram. The kind of couple that smiled with their eyes, touched each other's backs gently in public, and always held hands during church service. But behind the neatly arranged living room, beyond the smiling selfies and couple goals captions, there was a growing silence in their home, one that didn't begin with shouting, but with forgotten dishes. Teo worked from home full-time. He was a UI/UX designer for a European company. His job paid well, but it came with deadlines, multiple time zones, and long hours of staring at a screen in their home office. From 9 a.m. till late into the evening, he had Zoom calls, design iterations, and team reviews. The only breaks he had were to eat or occasionally walk around the compound for fresh air. Amaka, on the other hand, was a career-driven corporate lawyer. She left the house before 7 a.m. every day, dressed in a sharp suit and heels, her voice already rehearsing courtroom arguments in her head. Her firm was fast-paced, and in her field, respect was earned by being tougher and more consistent than the rest. She often came home at 9 p.m. or later, drained, phone still buzzing with client messages, her eyes already begging for sleep. At first, they found this rhythm manageable. They'd do a deep clean together, music blasting, laughter echoing. Sunday afternoons were for cooking in pairs and Netflix. They shared roles. They shared peace. But as work got more intense, as Amaka took on more clients, and Teo's company landed a major European contract, time began to vanish. The house began to suffer. It started with little things. Unwashed plates in the sink, shoes piling near the door, laundry baskets overflowing in the corner, used mugs scattered across desks and side tables. At first, Teo did what he could. After all, he worked from home. He washed a few plates in the morning, swept the living room, took out the trash, folded the clothes. But as the workload increased and deadlines stacked up, he couldn't keep up anymore. One evening, Amaka walked in from work, heels in hand, and stared at the mess in the living room. "Babe, the floor is dusty," she said, dropping her bag on the couch. She sighed and walked into the kitchen. The dishes were still in the sink. Again. She didn't say anything that night, but she didn't smile either. The fights began quietly, a sarcastic tone there. "I guess I'll just do the laundry since no one else will. You've been at home all day, Teo. You couldn't wash 2 plates. Do you think I'm on break here? I literally work till 11 p.m. sometimes. Well, I leave the house at 6 a.m., and this house still expects me to cook when I get back? You're not the only one with a job, Amaka. No, but I'm the only one who acts like this house is my responsibility." Their bed became colder. They started eating at different times. Some nights, Teo stayed in the office past midnight, just so he wouldn't have to face the tension. Amaka would pretend to be asleep, but her heart would be racing with thoughts, resentment, and guilt. They both loved each other, but neither could understand why the little things, sweeping, washing plates, folding clothes, were starting to feel like weapons. Amaka had started trying. Genuinely. She'd come back from work, change out of her heels into slippers, and immediately start picking up clothes, folding blankets, or sweeping the corners the housekeeper missed. Teo, still glued to his second monitor, would look up and frown. "Babe, please rest. You just got back from work. That's why we need to have a help." "I know," Amaka would reply, adjusting the TV stand. "But I can't just come home and lie down like a guest." "You're not a guest," he'd say. "You're my wife. You're tired. Let someone else do this." "I don't want anyone else doing it." This exchange repeated itself every few days. Amaka would try to help around the house after her exhausting legal battles, and Teo would gently but firmly ask her to rest. He couldn't bear seeing her push herself. She couldn't bear the thought of becoming one of those women who couldn't handle her home. One evening, the tension bubbled. Teo walked into the kitchen and found Amaka leaning over the sink, elbows deep in soapy water, her hair still pinned up from work, her makeup barely wiped off. "Again?" he said, setting his phone down. "Didn't Grace clean yesterday?" "She forgot to rinse the blender properly," Amaka replied. "It smelled sour." "So you're rewashing everything?" Amaka turned sharply. "Teo, I'm not helpless. It's just a few dishes." "That's not the point." "Then what's the point?" He sighed. "The point is, I want to see you well rested, not overworked. You already kill yourself at the office. Why carry the same weight at home when you don't have to?" Amaka dropped the sponge in the sink. "Because this is my house. I won't outsource my peace to a stranger." Teo blinked. "Peace? Yes," she continued, folding her arms. "I grew up in a home where my mother cleaned everything, even when she had help. She said a woman's home should carry her scent, her presence. I don't want some housekeeper doing everything for me. I didn't marry you so we can become housemates managed by paid staff." Teo walked over to her slowly. "It's not about outsourcing our marriage, Amaka. It's about sustainability. We're both busy. If you burn out trying to be a superwoman, I lose you anyway. I don't need you in the kitchen to know this house carries your presence." Amaka looked away, blinking fast. She wasn't crying, but she was on the edge. "I don't want to feel like a visitor in my own home," she whispered. "You never will," Teo said, reaching for her hand. "But if we're going to do life together for the next 30 or 40 years, we need help. I'm saying let's get someone full-time, someone who can cook, so we're not always ordering junk or eating cereal for dinner." Amaka was silent for a long time. Then she said, "I don't want another woman in my kitchen." Teo gently lifted her chin. "Then let's interview carefully. Someone hard-working, someone professional. We set boundaries. She works. She leaves. Just structure." Amaka hesitated. "You've really thought this through, haven't you?" He nodded. "Because I love you, and I love us, and I'm tired of watching us fall apart over rice and laundry." She smiled a little, resting her head against his chest. "You always say the right thing." "Because I mean it," he whispered. "And because I know my wife. Fierce in court, soft at home, and stubborn like a rock." She laughed, hitting his arm gently. He grinned. "We'll find someone, together, on our terms. Not to replace you, Amaka, but to support you." And slowly, she began to accept that love didn't mean carrying everything alone. Sometimes it meant knowing when to ask for help. Not because you were weak, but because you had someone who wanted to help you stay strong. The plan was clear: find help. Real help. After that emotional night in the kitchen, Teo and Amaka agreed to begin searching for a live-out housekeeper. Someone mature, professional, and respectful of their home and privacy. But agreeing was one thing, actually letting go was another. Amaka still came home from the law firm with case files and stress lines across her forehead. Still dropped her handbag on the dining table and walked straight into the kitchen to check if the stove was wiped properly. Still sighed when she saw the mop leaning untouched in the corner. She couldn't stop herself. Teo noticed. He'd stop work to say, "Babe, leave it. We agreed, remember?" And she'd respond, "It's just small wiping. I can't relax in a dirty house." Even when they interviewed 3 potential housekeepers, Amaka dismissed all of them. The first was too young. The second looked like someone who'd gossip. The third asked too many questions. To Teo, they were all decent candidates. To Amaka, none of them felt safe enough. Meanwhile, something else had started changing. At night, when the house was finally quiet and the room dimly lit, Teo would turn to her in bed, eyes warm, hands gentle, and try to pull her close. "Come here," he'd whisper. "It's been a long week." Amaka would let out a tired breath and shift slightly. "Not tonight. My whole body is aching." He understood. The first time, the second, even the third. But when "not tonight" became every night, when her back stayed turned and her arms stayed folded even when he tried to stroke her shoulder, a different kind of silence entered the room. And it was louder than any fight they'd ever had. Teo started to feel it. That invisible distance. It wasn't rejection just once. It was withholding, like she was slowly unplugging her body from their marriage. He didn't want to be selfish. He didn't want to pressure her. But weeks were passing. Weeks without touch. Weeks without closeness. And every night when she said, tomorrow, he held on to hope. But tomorrow would come, and she'd be folding clothes in the bedroom at 11 p.m. or half asleep over her laptop with a cup of Milo beside her. One Saturday morning, Teo finally said something. They were having breakfast, bread and tea in silence. "Babe," he said gently, not looking up, "do you still find me attractive?" She looked up, startled. "What?" "I'm just asking, because you've been distant. And it's fine if you're tired, but weeks have gone by, and I don't want us to pretend like nothing's wrong." Amaka stared at him, guilt creeping into her chest. "It's not you. I'm just overwhelmed." "I know. I see it. And I've tried to help, I really have. But I miss us." She dropped her spoon. "I don't even feel like a woman anymore, Teo," she said quietly. "I feel like an engine. Wake up, work, drive, cook, clean, sleep, repeat. There's no space to feel sexy or be soft." He reached across the table and held her hand. "Then let me help you create that space again. Let's stop pushing the house help idea. Let's hire. Today. Not tomorrow. Let someone else worry about the kitchen. Let me worry about you." Tears pricked her eyes, but she nodded. That same day, they reconnected with one of the previously shortlisted candidates. Mummy Stella, a 52-year-old widow with years of experience and a calm, motherly energy that even Amaka couldn't deny. She started the following Monday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., 3 days a week. By Thursday, the dishes were done before Amaka got home. The laundry folded. The floors gleaming. Teo didn't need to nag. Amaka didn't need to mop. For the first time in a long time, the house felt light. And so did she. That Friday night, as the AC hummed and the bedroom bathed in golden bedside light, Amaka came out of the bathroom in nothing but her silk robe. She walked over to Teo, who was pretending to read an article on his phone. She slid the device out of his hand and straddled his lap. "No more tomorrow," she whispered, kissing his cheek. "I'm here now." Teo smiled, relief and hunger filling his eyes. "Welcome back, Mrs. Teo." And for the first time in weeks, their bodies remembered what their hearts never forgot. Just when Teo and Amaka thought they had it all figured out with Mummy Stella, things took a sudden turn. Barely 2 weeks into her new schedule, Stella informed them that her daughter in Enugu had taken ill. She had to travel immediately and might not be back for months. Amaka and Teo thanked her warmly and sent her off with extra pay and good wishes, but deep down, they were back to square one. They tried again. One Sunday after church, they sat together on the dining table with a list of shortlisted names from a domestic agency a friend recommended. Each profile came with a small passport photo, experience level, and availability status. "This one lives nearby," Teo said, pointing. Amaka shook her head. "Only cooks. No cleaning." "This one has cleaning experience. But she has no references. I can't trust someone with no history." One by one, they crossed off names, until they got to the last profile. Her name was Peace, 23, from Delta State, 2 years of experience. Soft-spoken, calm, and fully available for live-in work. The only challenge? She didn't live close. Peace would have to move in. At first, Amaka wasn't sold. Teo looked over. "That's not necessarily a bad thing." Amaka gave him a look. "You know what I mean." She wasn't wrong. Peace was attractive, no makeup, but her beauty was youthful and clean. Smooth skin, small waist, broad hips. Something about her face suggested obedience. But her body was woman enough to make any wife raise an eyebrow. Teo, sensing the tension, leaned back. "We can keep looking." But they didn't have many options left. Their house was slipping again. The laundry piled up. The plates were back. Amaka was stressed. Teo was quietly frustrated. And the romance they had just revived began to flicker again. By Wednesday, Amaka gave in. "Call her. Let's at least interview her." The interview. Peace arrived at 10 a.m. that Saturday. She wore a long skirt and a pink blouse. Her voice was soft. Her head bowed slightly when she greeted. But even in her modest dressing, her figure was undeniable. She answered questions with clarity, knew how to cook Yoruba and Igbo dishes, understood house hygiene, could even do basic ironing. "I don't have family in Lagos," she said quietly. "So if I stay here, it will help me save." She looked at both of them, eyes steady, humble. Amaka watched her sharply. Teo tried not to stare too long. "She seems responsible," he said after she left. "And very comfortable in her body," Amaka replied dryly. Teo raised a brow. "Do you have a problem with that?" "I'm not saying she's done anything wrong, but having a beautiful young woman living under our roof, we need boundaries. Clear ones." "I agree," Teo said. "Then I'll lay them down," Amaka added. From the beginning, Peace moves in. By the next weekend, Peace had moved into the small BQ at the back of the duplex. They gave her a schedule: clean in the mornings, cook in the afternoons, no lingering around the main house after 7 p.m. Amaka went over everything herself. Rules about privacy, dressing modestly, no phones during work, and no entering the master bedroom without invitation. Peace listened, obeyed, never raised her voice, and to her credit, she was efficient. Within 2 weeks, the house was spotless. Teo even noticed she arranged his work desk better than the previous cleaner. Amaka had fewer things to complain about. Meals were hot. The bathrooms smelled of Dettol. Towels were folded hotel style. It almost felt too smooth. But Amaka remained guarded. She noticed how Peace smiled a little too brightly when Teo greeted her. She noticed how Teo praised the jollof rice one night, twice. She noticed how Peace lingered a few seconds after delivering towels to the room, eyes down, but body present. Teo didn't notice anything wrong, but Amaka's instincts were sharpening. She didn't regret hiring Peace, not yet, but a quiet fire had begun to stir at the edge of her mind. And in every perfect plate of soup Peace served, she tasted a new threat to her marriage. The house was spotless, the meals were delicious, the fridge was always stocked, and Amaka was quietly, deeply unsettled. Every time she stepped out of the house in the morning, heels clicking against the tiled floor, Peace would come out to greet her with that same calm smile. "Good morning, Ma." Always polite, always respectful. But behind the polite tone, Amaka's instincts stirred. She didn't have any evidence, nothing you could point to as disrespectful or inappropriate. But as a woman who knew her husband, and who had fought hard for her marriage, her gut whispered to her every single morning, "You left your husband alone." With a woman who's young, beautiful, and always available, Peace was efficient, too efficient. She didn't need reminders. She was always dressed modestly, always walked quietly, never entered their room. But somehow she was present. Her scent lingered. Her footsteps echoed lightly. Her food, her folded towels, her arranged slippers at the door. They were visible parts of her even when she wasn't. And it didn't help that Amaka had been too tired, way too tired, to keep up her end of the intimacy in the marriage. Nights had changed. It had become a rhythm now. Come home, drop her bag, kick off her heels, say 2 or 3 things to Teo in the kitchen, take a hot shower, and collapse into bed. Teo would try to pull her close. She'd respond with a mumbled, "I'm tired." Other times, she would even smile gently and whisper, "Tomorrow, baby, just let me sleep tonight." Teo never pressured her, but she saw the quiet in his eyes, the longing. She hated herself for saying no so often, but between endless court briefs, Lagos traffic, and the mental load of keeping their marriage afloat, she had nothing left in her body by 10 p.m. Nothing but fatigue and fear. Fear of what? It wasn't that she didn't trust Teo. She loved Teo, she knew Teo, but she also knew what it meant to have a man. A visually stimulated, emotionally neglected man. In a house where a woman with a soft body, a calm voice, and a helpful spirit was constantly present. She'd see Peace move past the living room sometimes, carrying laundry, hips gently swaying under the long skirt, and Amaka's throat would tighten. Teo's not blind. He would never intentionally cheat. But men don't always cheat with intention. Sometimes it's circumstanced, silenced, neglect, a moment of weakness, wrapped in comfort and convenience. And peace was convenient. One Friday evening, Amaka came home earlier than usual. Traffic had been light, and she needed to double-check a brief at home. As she walked in, she heard light laughter coming from the kitchen. She froze at the hallway entrance. Teo was laughing, that soft, amused laugh he gave when he was relaxed. And Peace was just finishing a sentence, smiling as she stirred something on the stove. Amaka didn't walk in immediately. She just stood there, quiet, still, watching. Nothing inappropriate. But they were comfortable. Too comfortable. And in that moment, a voice inside her whispered, "You've been sleeping through your own marriage." Later that night, in bed, Teo reached for her again. Not aggressively, but softly, with real longing. His hand on her waist, his face in her neck. "I've missed you," he whispered. Amaka said, "Tomorrow again." She turned toward him, rested her head on his chest, even though her body was exhausted. But her mind was racing with questions. What if he already noticed Peace? What if Peace was just waiting for the right opportunity? What if her tiredness had become a door swinging open slowly? That morning, Teo had woken up with one thing on his mind. Tonight would be different. For weeks now he'd been patient, gentle, understanding. Every time Amaka whispered, "Tomorrow," he'd swallowed the disappointment and hoped that tomorrow would finally come. But the truth? He was tired. Not just physically, but emotionally. Tired of sleeping beside the woman he loved and feeling like he was in bed with a ghost. Her body inches away, her spirit miles distant. So on his way back from picking up groceries that afternoon, he stopped by a small corner pharmacy. He didn't ask for it out loud, just gave the shop attendant that knowing look. The man nodded, opened the drawer, and slid a small red sachet across the counter. "It works, 1 full sachet with malt, and you're good to go," the attendant whispered with a grin. Teo paid and nodded, almost embarrassed, but determined. He got home, cleaned up, made sure the house was tidy. Peace had already finished the dishes and was quietly in her room. He checked the fridge, arranged the pillows on the couch, even lit one of the scented candles Amaka liked. He waited. 7:30 p.m. Nothing. 8:15, no call. 9:40, a message. "Still in traffic. Don't wait for me to eat." By the time Amaka finally walked in past 10:30 p.m., her face was heavy with exhaustion. Hair down, blazer in her hand, voice flat. "Hey babe," she said, dropping her bag. "Sorry I'm late." Teo stood up from the couch, forcing a smile. "It's okay. I was waiting for you." He walked over, hugged her from behind. She leaned into him briefly, then sighed. "I need to shower. My whole body's stiff." "Okay," he said, trying to be patient. "But after that, can we spend some time together? You know." She turned and gave him a tired smile, the kind that apologized without saying a word. "Let's see. I'm not promising, I'm just really, really tired." He nodded, still holding on to hope. 11:22 p.m. She was already asleep, still wearing her nightgown, one arm draped over the pillow, her phone buzzing softly beside her. Teo sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her. He had taken the manpower earlier, just before she got home. His body was buzzing, throbbing, but not just from the drink, from wanting her, from the weeks of buildup, from the quiet rejections that kept piling into something that now felt like rejection of him. He reached over, touched her shoulder softly. "Babe," he whispered. No response. He leaned in closer. "Please, just a little. I need you tonight." Amaka shifted, barely opening her eyes. "Teo, not now. I'm tired." He tried again, touching her thigh gently. She brushed him off sleepily. "Teo, please. Not tonight." And just like that, she was gone again. Asleep in seconds. That night, the silence in the master bedroom was thick. Teo lay wide awake, staring at the ceiling. Amaka was fast asleep beside him, her body turned to the wall. The same distance, the same posture, the same soft breathing he'd grown used to over the last few weeks. But inside him, something felt different tonight. It wasn't just the manpower still coursing through his body, making his heart race and thoughts blur. It wasn't even the physical need anymore. It was the feeling of being unseen, unheard, unneeded. He loved his wife, desperately, but it was like living in the same house with someone who was slowly leaving, not with her bags but with her absence. And the worst part? He was starting to wonder if anyone still saw him. 1:12 a.m. Teo stepped out of the bedroom. Not with a plan, not with desire, just confusion. He walked through the hallway barefoot, the house dark except for the orange glow from the kitchen nightlight. He passed the dining table, then out toward the back, where Peace's room sat, separated from the main house by just a short tiled path. He saw the light on under her door. His intention, just to clear his head, maybe talk, maybe feel human. He wasn't proud of himself for even walking there. But he knocked soft, almost unsure.
Top.
There was silence. Then the door creaked slightly open. Peace was standing there in a long gown, eyes puffy from sleep, one hand covering her chest. "Sir?" she said softly, blinking. Teo swallowed, suddenly aware of how wrong this looked, how out of place this was. But it was too late to back away completely. I couldn't sleep," he said.
Sorry.
"I just needed air." Peace nodded slowly, unsure of what to say. There was a pause, long, uncomfortable, charged. Teo ran a hand through his hair. "Do you mind if I sit for a minute? I just need to think." Peace hesitated, then opened the door wider. "Yes, sir. You can sit." Inside Peace's room. The room was clean, sparsely decorated. Just a small bed, folded clothes on a stool, and a little devotional book on the table. The fan creaked quietly above. Teo sat stiffly at the edge of Peace's small bed, the faint hum of the ceiling fan spinning above his head. The air in the room was warm, not hot, but thick, with silence, with tension, with the weight of everything he shouldn't be feeling. Peace sat just a few feet away, on the low stool by the window, wearing a long gown that clung loosely to her curves. Her voice had been soft, her face calm, but her eyes lingered on him too long. He shouldn't have come. He knew it the moment she opened the door. And yet here he was, trying to clear his head in the most dangerous place possible. "Is everything okay, sir?" she asked again. Teo didn't answer immediately. He was staring at his hands, knotted between his knees, as though they might betray him if he let them move freely. "It's just marriage things," he mumbled. She nodded like she understood something deeper. "Madam is very busy. Always tired." He looked up, surprised. She added quickly, I always see you in the kitchen alone. Sometimes you do laundry too." Teo chuckled bitterly. "Yeah, welcome to modern love." She tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. "You're a good man," she said, almost in a whisper. Then silence again. But this time it was charged. And then it happened. Peace stood up slowly, not abruptly, not aggressively, and took a single step closer to him. "I see the way you look tired sometimes too, sir." Teo blinked. "I'm fine." "No, you're lonely." The words hit him squarely in the chest. Peace moved her face closer to his. Teo was still, wanting it than ever and don't know how to start. Peace kissed him first. Immediately Peace light his fire. She apologized. Then he quickly pulled her closer and gave her a deep kiss, throwing her on bed and lying on top of her, putting his hands over her body, in between her thighs, feeling her wetness. He paused and asked, when was the last time she had sex? She confessed it's been long, that she wanted it so badly. Teo penetrated without hesitation, without protection, without checking where he was entering. He just wanted to feel light. Peace was loud. Teo wasn't gentle. The days he missed in his wife was channeled to Peace. So it happened. It wasn't short. Peace won't forget such in a hurry. All thanks to what he took earlier. Immediately he came. The room was dark, except for the faint blue light slipping through the blinds. Teo sat at the edge of the bed in the house help's quarters, chest rising and falling. His skin was still damp, his breath uneven, but his mind was already spiraling with regret. It had happened. One moment of weakness, one night of unmet needs and misguided desires, one mistake. Peace lay on the bed behind him, half covered by the sheet, watching him silently. There was no shame in her eyes, no judgment, just a strange quiet acceptance. "You're leaving?" she asked softly, already knowing the answer. Teo didn't respond. He simply stood up, pulled on his shorts, and without a word, walked out of the small room and back into the house. The hallway was cold, silent. Amaka was fast asleep upstairs. He brushed his teeth 3 times before he could even look at himself in the mirror. Days passed, but the guilt didn't. Teo avoided peace completely. He told her to speak only when spoken to. When Amaka was home, he acted extra attentive, trying to overcompensate with long hugs, warm dinners, and unnecessary gifts. But inside him, something was breaking. He couldn't believe what he had done. Not just the act, but the betrayal. And just when he thought the worst was behind him, the wife he asked for came too late. Each evening now, Amaka came home earlier than usual. She stopped taking late meetings, refused extra hours at the office. Her colleagues teased her about being soft for love again. She smiled and said nothing. Every evening, she was home by 6, dinner ready by 7, and by 8:30, she was always beside him on the couch, her head on his shoulder, or her hand curled into his. Sometimes she wore one of the silk dresses he liked. Other nights, his oversized shirt, the one she knew made him melt. And every night before bed, she whispered, "Tonight, you're mine." At first, Teo thought it was a phase. But 2 weeks passed, then 3. And now, every night, Amaka made love to him with full attention. Tender, warm, passionate. The kind of giving that broke him in silence. She called him baby again. She laughed like the early days. She kissed him like she was still in love. But every time her hand caressed his chest, he felt a wave of guilt rise and crash inside him. Because no matter how warm she was, he felt filthy. Teo couldn't focus at work. Emails went unanswered. Zoom calls blurred into noise. He'd sit in his car outside the office parking lot, engine off, breathing heavily, thinking about how Amaka had finally become everything he'd asked for, and how he was now the man who least deserved it. He started having nightmares, not of the night with peace, but of Amaka finding out again, of her standing at the doorway watching him with peace, of her face, broken, silent, bleeding with disappointment. He'd wake up sweating, with her still curled up beside him. Part 12. The guilt manifested. It began subtly. Teo started pulling away from her touch. The first night, he said, "I'm just tired tonight." The second, he blamed work stress. By the third night, Amaka sat up in bed and asked, "Teo, is something wrong?" He forced a smile. "Of course not. Everything's fine." She studied him quietly. "Are you still thinking about what happened?" He froze. She added gently, "I know you're punishing yourself, but if I say I've forgiven you, I mean it. I don't need you to keep proving you're sorry. I just need you to come back to me." That crushed him, because he hadn't even told her everything. She didn't know how deep the betrayal went. She didn't know peace seduced him because he had gone to her willingly. She knew the headline, but not the full story. And every smile, every touch, every moan that Amaka gave him now felt like the grace he didn't earn. The first signs. It started 2 nights after the mistake. At first, Teo thought it was nothing, just a random itch between his fingers. Then around his waist, a little rash, some dry skin, he told himself. Maybe heat rash, maybe stress. But the itching grew. By the third night, it was no longer occasional. It was relentless. His wrists, elbows, thighs, and most alarmingly, his groin. He scratched in his sleep, scratched in meetings, scratched until his skin turned red and sore. It was unbearable. Then one morning, Amaka pulled the sheets off the bed and frowned. "Teo, look at your back." He turned around. Tiny red spots had formed along his spine. Some were clustered. Others looked like insect bites. Amaka leaned closer. "Are you reacting to something?" "A cream." "I don't know." he lied quickly, pulling on his shirt. That was the same day she scratched her inner arm for the first time. At that point, he and Amaka had resumed full intimacy. She had been giving him everything again: body, warmth, softness. Unaware that every night, with every unprotected touch, he was giving her something else in return. A few days later, she began scratching lightly. He noticed but said nothing. Then one evening, she lifted her blouse and said, "Babe, is this a rash?" Her lower abdomen had small, reddish bumps. She laughed it off. "Maybe something bit me while I was cooking." Teo's heart dropped, because he had just looked up the symptoms again that afternoon. Red, itchy bumps, worsens at night, common around the waist, wrists, and genitals, easily spread through skin-to-skin contact. He knew exactly what it was. Scabies. He had caught it from Peace, and now he had given it to his wife. Amaka stood in front of the bathroom mirror that morning, gently tracing the rash on her lower stomach with her fingertips. The bumps were no longer just a few. They had spread. Her wrists now bore faint reddish marks, and her thighs itched at night until she couldn't sleep. She didn't panic, but she noticed, and then something else. When she looked over at Teo, sitting on the edge of the bed, scratching just below his waistband when he thought she wasn't looking. A quiet alarm began ringing in her chest. This wasn't coincidence. Couldn't be detergent. Couldn't be weather. Two people in the same house don't develop the same strange rash at the same time, unless one gave it to the other. And then it hit her. One of them brought it home. She didn't say anything that morning. Not yet. But her mind started collecting clues like puzzle pieces. Teo's recent shift in behavior. Restless, distant, then suddenly too helpful. His random evening drives to clear his head. The extra towels he'd asked her to wash separately. The way he flinched the other night when she touched his back. The faint smell of unfamiliar ointment on his pillow. And then, the clincher, she saw his wallet on the kitchen counter. It had slipped open slightly. Inside, partially visible, was a clinic appointment card from City Skin Dermatology. She stared at it. He never told her he'd been to a doctor. He never even mentioned he was concerned. Quiet confrontation. That evening, she didn't cook. She sat in the living room waiting, dressed simply, her eyes fixed on the front door. When Teo walked in, carrying a plastic bag of antibiotics and cream from the pharmacy, he froze when he saw her. Amaka spoke before he could greet her. "How long have you been going to the clinic?" Teo blinked. "What? You heard me." He placed the bag slowly on the table. "Just recently." "For what?" He hesitated. "Just a reaction. They said it's nothing serious." She stood. "Then why didn't you tell me? Why are we both scratching our bodies raw, and you're seeing a doctor behind my back?" Teo swallowed. "Amaka, don't lie." Her voice was low, trembling not with fear, but controlled. The kind of voice a woman uses when she's done hoping for honesty and is now demanding it. Teo didn't say much. The next day, Amaka left work early. She didn't tell Teo. She didn't even mention it to her assistant. Her chest was tight the entire drive to the hospital, not from fear of the rash, but from the weight of what she already suspected. At the clinic, the female doctor examined the reddish clusters on her wrists and thighs, took a quick skin scraping, and asked a few questions. "Have you been experiencing intense itching, mostly at night?" "Yes," Amaka replied. "Have you noticed this in anyone else in your household?" She paused, then nodded slowly. "My husband." The doctor nodded back as if the puzzle had already solved itself. "It's scabies," she said. "A common parasitic skin condition caused by mites that burrow into the skin. It spreads through prolonged skin contact, most commonly through sex." Amaka's heartbeat slowed. "Sex?" she echoed, her voice tightening. "Yes, or shared bedding, clothing. But most cases between adults come from intimacy." The words echoed in her head like stones dropped in water. Scabies, transmitted through sex. She sat there, holding the prescription the doctor handed her, but her mind wasn't in the room anymore. It was back home, back in their bed, replaying every time Teo had touched her in recent weeks. The soft kisses, The sudden attentiveness, the way he said he wanted to make things right. And now it all felt manufactured. A lie wrapped in affection. When Amaka got home that night, she found Tayo in the living room, sitting with the TV on but barely watching. He looked up when she entered, guilty, expectant. She walked straight past him, put her bag down gently, removed her heels and came back to the living room. Her face was unreadable. I saw the doctor today. Tayo's eyes narrowed. You did. She nodded. She confirmed it. Scabies. She sat down opposite him and leaned back slowly into the couch, crossing her legs. She also said it's usually spread through sexual contact. Tayo didn't speak, didn't blink. So, she said, her voice quiet but edged with steel. Do you want to say something now? Or should I just assume what I've already pieced together? Amaka laughed softly, but it wasn't from humor. It was that dangerous kind of laugh that said, I knew it. I asked you for the truth yesterday, she said. You stood there and told me about gym towels and hotel sheets. Still, Tayo said nothing. Amaka leaned forward slightly. Do you know how insulting that is? Not just what you did, but that you thought I was stupid enough to believe it. Her voice cracked slightly. You infected me, Tayo. That line hung in the air like smoke. You brought something from someone else's body and planted it into mine, without telling me, without asking. Do you know how that feels? Tayo's mouth finally opened. I didn't mean to hurt you, Amaka. I swear. But you did. She stood now, unable to stay seated. Amaka stood at the edge of the living room, arms crossed over her chest, her voice calm but razor sharp. She looked Tayo directly in the eye. Did you sleep with peace? Tayo's heart thudded loudly in his chest. He had been expecting the question for days now. Ever since the clinic, the cream, the diagnosis, the quiet fury behind her eyes. But now that it was here, right in front of him, he still wasn't ready. He shifted slightly on the couch. His hands trembled. No, he said quickly. Too quickly. Amaka stared at him without blinking. No, she repeated. You didn't. I didn't sleep with her, Tayo said again, trying to sound sure. Look, maybe she brought something into the house. Maybe we both used the same towel by mistake or something. But nothing happened between us. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. He knew it, and so did Amaka. She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. So you're saying you didn't have any sexual contact with her? No, he said again, now more desperate. Amaka, I made mistakes. I should have told you sooner about the itching, about the clinic. But I never touched her. I would never do that to you. But Amaka had lived with this man for years. She knew when he was telling the truth. And she knew when he was trying to protect a lie so fragile, it would break with just one more question. She looked at him for a long time, then slowly sat on the armrest of the chair across from him. Okay, she said softly. Tayo blinked. Okay, I'll believe you, she said, her voice suddenly calm. But let me ask one more question. He nodded cautiously. If it wasn't from peace, and it wasn't from me, who did you get it from, Tayo? Silence. He froze. And right there, in the quiet of their living room, Amaka knew the answer. His silence was louder than any confession. I was willing to work on this marriage, Amaka whispered, rising again. I've been blaming myself for not being around enough, not giving you enough. And I almost believed I was the problem. She shook her head, a bitter smile on her lips. But you're not just weak, Tayo. You're a coward. Tayo's shoulders sagged. I was scared of what you'd do if you knew the truth, he muttered. You should have been more scared of what I'd do once I found it out myself, she snapped. He opened his mouth to explain, to soften it, to fix something. But there was nothing left to say. It was a Wednesday morning. Quiet. Ordinary. But Amaka had learned by now. Truth doesn't always crash through the door. Sometimes, it seeps in slowly, painfully, with evidence you can't unsee. She sat on the staircase, pretending to scroll through her phone, while peace swept the hallway. That's when she noticed it. The girl paused, placed the broom against the wall, and began to scratch. First her lower back, then her inner arm. Then again, a little too hard behind her neck. Amaka's gaze sharpened. This wasn't the first time. She had seen it multiple times for days now. And it wasn't just random scratching. It was the kind of itching that came with shame. The kind that people hide when they think no one is watching. That moment confirmed it. Peace had the rash too. And that could only mean one thing. Her quiet decision. Amaka stood up and walked slowly back to her room, eyes dry, but chest full of fire. She didn't scream. She didn't confront her. She didn't even ask questions. Because the answer was already obvious. And any denial would only rub salt into a wound she was trying so hard not to bleed out from. She sat on the edge of the bed and whispered to herself. He did it with her. It wasn't a suspicion anymore. It wasn't even a gut feeling. It was fact. A woman's knowing, the final piece of a puzzle she didn't want to complete. Amaka blamed herself, not because she deserved the blame, but because that's what women in love do when they're betrayed. They look inward first. Maybe if I wasn't too tired that night. Maybe if I had said yes instead of tomorrow. Maybe if I had come home earlier, loved harder, tried more. But deep down, she knew it wasn't her fault. She had been exhausted, yes, working hard, yes, human, yes. But she had never been unfaithful. The family treatment plan. They all underwent treatment. Teo, Amaka, and Peace. She bought separate creams for everyone, sterilized the sheets, cleaned every surface of the house, and even burned some of the towels. She kept it all civil. No drama. No raised voices. Even Peace didn't suspect that Amaka now knew everything. They took their pills, rubbed their ointments, healed in silence. But something else began healing in Amaka too, her clarity. Because if love had made her blind, betrayal had given her sight. Part 32. Her final step. One quiet afternoon, just after Peace had finished washing the dishes, Amaka called her to the living room. Peace came, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel, cheerful and unsuspecting. "Yes, Ma," she said, still smiling. Amaka looked at her and smiled back. A tired, composed, polite smile. "You've been with us for a while now, and I appreciate the help, but I think it's time you moved on." Peace blinked. "Ma, I need someone who can come part-time, just once or twice a week. We're trying to make some changes in the house." There was no anger in her tone, just finality. Peace nodded slowly, sensing that nothing she said would change the outcome. "Okay, Ma. Should I pack this evening?" "Yes," Amaka replied. "I'll pay you fully, and even extra for this month." Peace whispered a thank you and walked away, quiet, respectful, but carrying her own shame. Amaka sat still after she left the room, her body calm, but her spirit scarred. She didn't throw Peace out to punish her. She did it to protect her home, her sanity, her worth. And because even if she hadn't screamed, she refused to keep a stranger under her roof who wore the scent of her husband's betrayal on her skin. Kindly like, share, and subscribe for more amazing videos.